No, you are not experiencing deja vu. Melanin deficient Nick over at The Fat Electrician did literally just drop a War Dogs video over on his channel. But I, Black Nick, already read the book, I already wrote the script, and last I checked, this is still America, so I'ma do me anyway.
I'm not allowed to stand up for myself? I thought this was America!
Alright, so let's get into this.
Wait.
Okay, so normally this is the part of the video where I throw out a bunch of insane facts to hook you in and make sure that you stick around and watch the entire video from start to finish to include the ad. And you know what, today is literally no different. Because the War Dogs as we know them today basically only exists because a poodle trainer and some actors decided to Wonder Twins power team up, a junior enlisted Coast Guardsman finessed some German spies out of a few $1,000s, and America used the oldest fundraising strategy in human history, which was to slap on some sex appeal to bankroll the entire thing. And if that insane out of context word salad doesn't do it for you, then really, I don't know what will. Guys, we've got a whole lot to cover today, so let's get some bills paid first and then jump right into it. This video is sponsored by TangoAlpha.store. Now guys, like most of my videos, we've got a limited edition shirt that will be sold for the next 90 days and 90 days only. Grab yourself a War Dog shirt and show some love for the goodest boys and girls who love to bite them some baddies. Anyway, that's enough of me shilling my own merch. Now let's get back to the doggos. Our story starts way back in the ancient world when dogs weren't just lying around the fire waiting on table scraps or begging for belly rubs. Back then, they were our guards, they were our trackers, they were hunters, and when things got really ugly, they went to war right alongside the men that they viewed as family. Now, long before radios, night vision, or anything even resembling a modern military, people had already figured out that a dog could hear what you couldn't, smell what you can't, and attack with a level of commitment usually reserved for unpaid taxes and family get-togethers. For thousands of years, civilizations all over the world found ways to drag man's best friend into mankind's worst hobby: war. But unlike pretty much everybody else, America never really fell in love with the idea of dogs in combat. It's not like they hadn't flirted with the idea before, because they had, but nobody ever saw enough value in it to build up a real program. So every time the idea came up, the same thing kept happening. It just got shoved right back to the line, and everyone just forgot about it. Now fast forward a bit, and on December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor and changed the entire world overnight. That singular attack kicked America into high gear, and everybody wanted to do their part. And that includes the first protagonist in our story, a poodle breeder.
So, what?
Arlene Erlanger had been raising show dogs since she was a kid, and for a long time, she believed that dogs could help America to win this war. Now, Erlanger wasn't stupid. She knew that the US military wasn't exactly excited about the idea of bringing dogs into this fight, so she came up with a plan. She picked up the phone, pitched the idea of a movement, and pretty soon, she had some major names from the show dog world right there alongside her. That movement became known as Dogs for Defense, or DFD. And DFD was an all-volunteer organization made up of some of the best people in the canine world, and all of them came in to help.
We're here because you're looking for the best of the best of the best, sir!
Only 1 month after Pearl Harbor, Dogs for Defense had already recruited its first dogs, and before long, those new four-legged volunteers would become known as the Canine Corps. And they got the word out the old-fashioned way too. They used radio announcements, newspaper articles, anything that they could use to ask Americans to donate their pets to help win this war. Now, while DFD was out there doing its best to spread the word, unknown to them at the time, another angle was already being worked by what was essentially a drama club. And when I say drama club, I mean the America Theater Wing, which is the same people who still run the Tony Awards to this day. Which I know sounds absolutely ridiculous. Like, why would a bunch of actors and radio performers want to get involved with War Dogs? Well, they didn't. Well, at least not directly. Now, like everybody else, they wanted to help the war effort any way they could, so they met with the Army's Quartermaster General and offered their support. In fact, they wanted to help so badly that they even offered to give this man a free airplane, which, to be clear, is a hell of a way to open negotiations.
A G5 airplane. Yes.
Now, the general politely declined because, you know, accepting a free airplane from a bunch of actors is probably not a good look. But he also made it very clear that if they had any other ideas, well, he was open to hearing them. And that's when Lieutenant Colonel Clifford C. Smith spoke up. Smith was one of the first men to help bridge the gap between the military and this civilian push for war dogs when he recommended using dogs as sentries because, as he put it, quote, "A trained dog is even better than 3 or more men." Well, the general approves it, he loves it, and in fact, he then looks over at the American theater wing people and he basically is like, well, you said you wanted to help, right? Now, the wing was eager to help, but there was just one small problem. These are theater people. They don't know anything about procuring, raising, or training dogs. But the one thing a bunch of actors and radio performers do have is connections.
I drink and I know things.
And one of those connections just so happened to be Arlene Erlanger. And so they link up, they start pushing the message even harder, and pretty soon, with a little more convincing, the US Army is officially on board. By March 13, 1942, the US Army Quartermaster Corps had officially authorized the acquisition of its first 200 sentry dogs. And on top of that, Dogs for Defense was now in charge of the procurement, training, and housing of all US war dogs. And the entire thing just completely took off. Everybody wanted to do their part, including Hollywood. Famous actors, Oscar winners, even opera singers were donating their personal dogs to help protect America. Even legendary Hollywood dog trainer Carl Spitz, you know, the same man who trained Toto for The Wizard of Oz, he donated dogs to the cause and would later even help train dogs for the first Marine War Dog platoon. But by far and away, the biggest contributor to the War Dog success story was the everyday American. Thousands of owners, and I'm sure with a certain amount of sadness because after all, these were still their family pets, they voluntarily gave up their dogs to help win this war. Actually, they must not have loved their animals that much if they just gave them up so easily. Nope, not doing this with you today. If you can't understand how a person would voluntarily give up something that they love, like their own dog, because they wanted to do their part and sacrifice for a chance at helping to save the entire flipping planet, then I don't know what to tell you. If this is hurting your tiny snowflake heart so much, then go outside and touch grass or something. Anyway, as you'd expect, not everyone was 100% on board with giving up their bestest fur buddy for the war, with some owners going out of their way to basically do take-backsies on their pets. In fact, in one instance, a husband called up saying, "My wife has suffered a severe nervous collapse," and the attending physician declared nothing would restore her but the pet's return. Now, who knows how true that actually was, but I can only assume that since the dog hadn't started training yet, and there was no reason to subject yourself to Karen energy if you don't have to, they just sent the dog back home. Now, in another case, one woman gave what I would say is a much more sensible and well-reasoned argument when she wrote, quote, "In an answer to your recent letter, I wish to say that the Army may not have my dog. Her license number is 7220 and you can cross her off your list. The Army has my husband, 2 brothers-in-law, my father-in-law, the Navy has one of my brothers, and the government has 2 more. I think that is enough."
And we are going to get him the hell out of there.
Dogs for Defense centers processed nearly 40,000 dog hopefuls with an intense screening process that weeded out nearly half in the first round alone. The initial screening included a questionnaire covering things like a dog's health record, temperament, whether they were easily spooked by loud noises, and the like. And if they managed to make it past that, well, they still had a whole other list of criteria to meet, all of which were outlined in a technical manual authored by none other than Arlene Erlanger herself. Some of the requirements included the dog being physically sound with strong backs, deep chests, and well-cushioned pads. They had to be muscular, alert, energetic, and eager to please. Yeah, talking about you, Vi. But you know what? I wouldn't get my hopes up yet, girly, because you still had to be between 23 and 28 inches tall at the shoulder. They had to be between 14 months and 3.5 years old. And while males were preferred, females were also accepted. Although that being said, over time, it became policy that all females had to be spayed. Which, if you've never been around a male dog while a female dog is in heat, I'd say that they made a pretty solid call on that one.
I'll just die already.
In fact, once they made the policy permanent, the manual, and keep in mind that this was written by Arlene Erlanger herself, well, she updated the rule to read, quote, "It has been determined that the spaying of bitches is a military necessity and to the best interest of the military service."
Son of a...
In the early days of 1942, Dogs for Defense and the Quartermaster Corps were working with 32 different dog breeds. Now, over time, that number dwindled to 18, and then by 1944, it had been cut all the way down to just 7. Now, some breeds got removed simply because there weren't enough of them to go around stateside, while others got cut because they just flat out didn't perform all that well in the field. What do I mean by this? For example, during trials, they found that bird dog breeds had a tendency to, quote, "Instinct led them to point at more parakeets than at the enemy."
Under no circumstances are you permitted to. Squirrel!
In the end, the Army's final list of acceptable breeds, both purebred and crossbred, included the Alaskan Malamute, Belgian sheepdogs, farm collies, Doberman pinschers, Eskimos, German shepherds, and Siberian huskies. By June of 1942, just 3 months into the program, the Army conducted an inspection, and what it found was not great. The dogs in training were making little to no progress. Kennels were overcrowded, no formal or standardized training manual existed, and when you combine that with civilian trainers who had little to no experience with life in the military, well, the entire thing was discouraging to say the least. But a hero's job is never done, and fortunately for America, a lone seaman is about to change the entire trajectory of this whole story. Alright, so let's recap, shall we? America had been doing its own thing, no need for dogs in the military, Pearl Harbor happens, a poodle trainer and some actors combine forces like Captain Planet to save the actual planet, but things still aren't moving fast enough to make any real difference. Man, if only there was some sort of close call that was big enough to force the US military to take this thing even more seriously.
And here we go.
Cue the Germans! In the middle of the night on June 13th, 1942, a German submarine surfaces just off the coast of Long Island. 4 Nazi saboteurs come ashore under the cover of darkness and fog in a rubber boat carrying 4 large boxes. And inside those boxes was enough US cash money and explosives to terrorize the country for a year or more. This sabotage campaign would later be known as Operation Pastorius, and the goal was brutally simple: cripple America from within. Their target list included critical infrastructure like the Niagara Falls hydroelectric plant, metal factories, and even the New York City water supply, just to name a few. And if that wasn't bad enough, just 4 days later, the exact same thing happened again. Another submarine dropped off 4 more saboteurs just south of Jacksonville, Florida. Sounds like a good plan in theory. However, what these Long Island wannabe pirates hadn't counted on was the cunning of a lone unarmed Coast Guard seaman second class named John Cullen. And you know what? Moving forward, I'm going to just start calling him John because he is officially being added to the list of badass men named John. On this particular night, John was out patrolling his assigned 6-mile stretch of beach when he ran smack dab into the Germans, who were literally burying their supplies in the sand.
What are you doing?
Nothing. Me? Just hanging around.
Now, knowing that they've been had, the leader of the Germans offered John $260, which is a little over $5,000 in today's money, in an attempt to keep the lone seaman quiet. But apparently the Germans did not know that the combination of being junior enlisted and being named John automatically means that he's about that life. So John pockets the money, immediately runs off to get help, and then brings back a pack of armed Coast Guardsmen back to the site. But by then the Germans were long gone, but their little arson starter pack was quickly found, and not 10 days later, all 4 of them, plus the other 4 who had landed off the coast of Florida, were rounded up in what was at the time the largest manhunt in FBI history.
We would have gotten away with it if it hadn't been for you meddling kids!
Guys, this is exactly the kind of thing Dogs for Defense was trying to prevent, so now it was time to get extra serious about training these dogs. Between August of 1942 and April of 1943, 5 new War Dog reception and training centers were established all across America. Oversight of the War Dog program fell under the U.S. Quartermaster Corps, the U.S. Army Veterinary Corps kept the animals healthy, and Dogs for Defense focused purely on recruiting dogs. The Marine Corps and the Coast Guard also set up training centers of their own, but we'll have to get into the Marine Corps in another video because, as you'd imagine, the Marine Corps just had to be different. Okay, so now they had the dogs and they had the facilities, but they still had one major problem left. How exactly do we train them? Well, fortunately for America, over in Great Britain, they already had a long history with war dogs, including their most recent success with them in World War I. So on February 1st, 1943, the director of the British War Dog Training School traveled stateside, and he brought 4 dogs and 2 trainers along with him. Their demonstration of scout and messenger dogs was so successful that the team then traveled around to the other training centers, helping to train the trainers and using their own books as a foundation for what would eventually become our own training manuals. Now, so far things are going well, but the War Dog program, like so many others, could never escape the reality of needing money to function. But hey, you know what? No problem, because this is America, and what are we damn good at? Marketing. And what do Americans already love? Dogs. All you gotta do is mix the two together, add in a little flair, and pretty soon the money ought to start rolling in, right? Right. Dogs for Defense launched a new slogan that read, "Give dogs and dollars," and then they proceeded to put that Shih Tzu everywhere. They put it over radio waves, newspapers, ads, cartoons, mailers, you name it, you couldn't escape it. The Ralston Purina Company, yes, the same dog food company that still exists today, donated all the dog food for new recruits right up until the time they shipped out to their training camps. Hell, even the cigarette companies got in on it with some of the most effective ads of the entire campaign. Apparently, mixing busty blonde bombshells with Belgian sheepdogs is a highly effective form of wartime advertising. Who would have guessed?
I did.
Speaking of raising money, what about all those dog owners whose pets didn't qualify for war dog service, or who just really didn't want to hand their dog over to Uncle Sam, but they still wanted to feel like they were doing their part? Well, once again, there's apparently no problem that marketing can't fix. Alright, so here's the play. We set up a new organization called the War Dog Fund, and for a small fee, people can register their dog with the Canine Home Guard. Okay, but hold on. Most of the actual war dogs are going to the Army. What if somebody's son is in, let's say, the Navy? Well, then they pick Navy, or the Marines, or the Coast Guard. Hell, I don't care. As long as the money's green, they can have whatever flavor of patriotism they want. Alright, I like where this is headed, but how do we get them to donate more? Easy. We give the dogs ranks. The more they donate, the higher the rank. Okay, keep talking. $1 gets your dog a private or a seaman. $5 gets you a sergeant or chief petty officer. $25 gets you a colonel or a captain. And for $100, your dog is now a general or an admiral. That is disgustingly effective. Yeah, it was my idea. I know it is. I don't know. I still don't think it's enough. I got it. A collar tag. Absolutely. Give the people something to show off. You know what? I'm with you when you're right, but it still doesn't quite feel like it's enough. Window sticker. Oh, there it is. My man. Yeah, see what we did there? Now they can donate, and they can let the whole neighborhood know they donated. Exactly. Patriotism and public flexing. Do we know how to move product, or do we know how to move product? And wouldn't you know it, people ate that Shar-Pei up. Even President Roosevelt registered his own Scottish Terrier as a private. Sir, I've been thinking. Now look, I done told you about that. Yeah, sir, I know the drill. If Uncle Sam wanted me to have a brain, he'd issue me one. But just hear me out for a second. Man, this better be good. Sir, what if they don't have a dog? Who's a good... Wait, hold on. What do you mean if they don't have a dog? You mean if they're not American? No, sir. They're Americans. They just have pets, other than dogs. Man, I gotta be honest with you. That sounds like borderline communist behavior to me. But, you know what? I'll entertain it. Do they have money, though? Yes, sir. Then you know what? I don't care. If they want to register a cat, a bird, a goat, or whatever they got running around the house, then let them do it. How about turtles, sir? Are those allowed too? Yes, damn it, I don't care. If the little peckerwood up the road wants to sign up his pet turtle, his pet cat or bird, then let him, as long as we getting this money.
Pretty bird. Yes, pretty bird.
Even the Hollywood elite got on board with this, and before long, the whole campaign had gone international. After 14 months of fundraising, some 25,000 pet owners, including people from every single state in America, had donated a total of $75,000 to the War Dog program, or about $1.42 million in today's money. Initial dog training came in a few different forms, with the Army handling most of it, the Coast Guard running 3 training centers of its own, and the Marines, man, they were just out there just being Marines. And you know what? Why wouldn't they be like that? Because the USMC has never once in the history of ever looked at something considered standard issue and thought to themselves, you know what? That'll do. No, they went off in their own direction, just doing their own thing. They set up their own training centers, they wanted to source their own dogs, and on top of that, they only wanted one breed. The Doberman Pinscher. But like I said, that's a story for another day. We've got enough to cover here already. Anyway, after the dogs were officially sworn in, they went through a full week of orientation, they got a full physical, they were tattooed with a serial number on their left ear, and then began 2 weeks of basic training. Now, basic training was all the stuff that you'd expect a reasonably well-trained dog to already know. You know the basics like sit, down, heel, stay, come. all that. But because these were supposed to be military dogs, they also had to get used to things a little more out of the ordinary. Things like wearing a gas mask, riding in military vehicles, and since they would presumably be operating on an active battlefield, they also had to get comfortable around gunfire. Now, after passing basic training, the dogs would then move on to specialized training based on how well they performed in initial training. Now, for the most part, they got separated into one of two categories. In Group A, you had your meatheads. Now, these dogs, they were like those dudes, you know the type, the guys who could lift all the weights but couldn't tell you the last time they lifted a book. Yeah, those dogs usually got put on sentry or attack dog duty. But then you had Group B. And no, I'm not talking about Group B, that insane rally race where literally anything was allowed and got banned faster than the ATF decided to ban bump stocks, because I know that's exactly what you were thinking when I said Group B. We really wasn't though. Anyway, Group B is where you would find your genetic lottery winners. Now, these dogs had to be strong and fast, sure, but they also had to be smarter, higher energy, and more eager to learn. Now, this is where your more specialized roles went. Your scouts, your messengers, your casualty dogs, etc. The specialized training could last anywhere between 8 to 13 weeks, with the Group B nerds obviously needing a lot more schooling than the Turley dogs over here in Group A.
Take a piss.
And hey, look, if it sounds like I'm being harsh to the Group A dogs, don't get offended. Is there anything more adorable on the planet than a big dumb dog? In fact, during one training event, a Great Dane named Duke was sent out to jump some hurdles. Well, Duke, having absolutely no clue at all what his handler was wanting him to do, but still very much eager to please, ran straight up to the first hurdle, grabbed it in his mouth, and with his tail probably breaking the sound barrier for how proud he was, dropped it right at his handler's feet. Now, after a few more tries, Duke eventually figured it out, but it was pretty clear that he'd probably make for a better sentry dog. And you know what, now that I think about it, we've said the word sentry quite a few times so far in this video, so what exactly is a sentry dog? Well, when it came to war dogs, there were a couple different paths that they could take to include sentry, attack, silent scout, messenger, and casualty dog. Now, sentry dog, also known as a watchdog, is one of mankind's oldest uses for dogs. And there's a good reason for that, and it's because it just works. A sentry's whole job was to stay in one place, stand guard, and alert on anything nearby that seemed strange or unusual. That could mean the smell of a person who smelled different from all the other people that they had been around, someone that they weren't trained to recognize, or even the smell of fire off in the distance. Basically, a sentry dog was trained to be suspicious of every human being on the planet other than its handler. And naturally, with that kind of wide net approach to security, sentry dogs were kept on an extremely short leash. No pun intended. Now, when you take a dog trained for sentry duty and send him off to finishing school, well, what you get back is an attack or police dog. Now, unlike sentries, attack dogs generally worked off leash and were trained to attack either on command or when provoked. And the characteristics of a good attack dog back then are pretty much a mirror image of what we still look for today. They had to be fearless, fast, powerful, and heavy enough to, quote, throw a man to the ground with the impact of his body. Now look guys, I don't care who you are. I have seen video after video after video of some of the most hardened criminals on the planet stare down the barrels of pistols, rifles, and shotguns and laugh at the police. But it never, I say again, it never gets old watching a grown man go full bitch the second the threat of a bitch biting that buttocks gets introduced into the conversation.
Oh shit!
Now, pretty much on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, you had silent scout dogs or patrol dogs. These were basically sentries on steroids, whose whole purpose in life was to go out on patrol and warn their handlers about enemy activity. Working both on and off leash, these dogs could detect an ambush that would have been otherwise damn near impossible to detect in the thick, dank, dark jungle. Now, that was the scout part of their title, but the silent part of it came from how they alerted to threats. Instead of barking like a sentry dog, these dogs would pick up on even the slightest amount of enemy presence and then warn their handler by stopping short, raising their hackles, growling, or sometimes they would just stop and go completely rigid.
Time's up.
A good scout dog had a sharp sense of its surroundings, and a good handler knew exactly how to read his dog's tells. And working together, a good scout team could save hundreds, if not thousands, of lives. Now, another way man's best friend could keep man alive in combat was through communication. In thick jungle with cut wires or no wires at all, a messenger dog could carry critical information exactly where it needed to go. And not only could these dogs operate day or night, rain or shine, but because of their speed and small size, they were also stupid difficult for the enemy to intercept or stop them from doing their duty. Messenger dogs were specifically trained to function in and completely ignore the hellacious sounds of battle. According to the training manual, quote, every known distraction must be introduced during training, such as bomb detonations, shell and gunfire, troop and motor traffic, and the presence of moving or stationary troops, civilians, and animals. Messenger dogs could also help lay communication wire, and in some cases were even used to carry emergency supplies with loads up to 25 pounds. Some were even equipped to carry as many as 2 carrier pigeons to further boost their communications capability.
Can't track it. Can't hack it, can't trace it.
Now, one of the things that made messenger dogs unique is that they required 2 handlers. One handler would send the dog off with the message, and then that dog would run through smoke, gunfire, mortars, you name it, to go off and find the second handler who was located on the other end. And then you had casualty dogs. These dogs worked alongside medical personnel by locating wounded soldiers. Now, they would operate off leash and they would go out looking for men who were either lying unconscious on the battlefield or maybe they were buried under copious amounts of debris. Now, one of the most important traits for a casualty dog is that it had to be extremely friendly. These dogs were trained to never bite, even if they felt threatened. Which makes 100% logical sense, because the last thing you would want is for some wounded soldier who is maybe half conscious and scared out of his mind to lash out at a dog who was there only trying to help him, and then the dog bite him. When all was said and done, nearly 10,500 dogs were trained and qualified for the Canine Corps, and of those, over 80% served stateside in the US. Contrary to popular belief, only about 1,900 actually served overseas, with most of them going to the European theater and the rest headed off to the Pacific. Most dogs serving stateside belonged to the Coast Guard, and together they covered roughly 3,700 miles of coastline. Now, one of the issues those dogs had to deal with on beach patrol was slicing up their paws on broken seashells. Ugh. Take a guess at how many takes it took me to get that line right. She sells seashells down by the sea. She sells seashells down by the seashore. She sells seashells down by the sea. I give up. Okay. Moving on. The solution to this has got to be one of the most adorable things the US military has ever fielded. They issued little doggy booties in sets of 4, and apparently they worked so well that they later did the exact same thing out west, but they did it in leather to protect the dog's paws from cactus thorns. Now, if it hasn't become clear by now, the Coast Guard played a massive role in the War Dog story, and one of the best stories that they have revolves around a dog named Nora. Nora was a German Shepherd purchased for 50 cents by apprentice seaman Evan Mitchell. Mitchell trained Nora himself and brought her along on patrol duty while he was stationed in North Carolina. On one freezing night in November 1943, Mitchell and Nora were out on their normal patrol when Mitchell suddenly collapsed, possibly from the cold or maybe because of a prior illness that he had, and as a result, he fell near the water's edge. Now, Nora tried her best to wake him up, and when that didn't work, she grabbed his cap, and how in the hell she knew to do this still blows my mind, but that's beside the point. She then ran as fast as she could to the nearest guard station and handed the cap to the Coast Guardsman on duty. Now, the man takes the cap and he's just looking at this thing, and he saw Mitchell's name on it, and he sees how Nora's acting, how she's whining, she's acting frantic, and clearly she's trying to tell him something.
What is it, boy? What are you trying to say?
Eventually, he pieces it together, and Nora leads him back to where Mitchell was lying unconscious, which ended up saving his life because he was either going to die from exposure or from drowning. Now, with stories as good as these, as you'd expect, Uncle Sam was pretty damn proud of his newest service members. And since good marketing is essential to good fundraising, every now and then they'd put on dog shows so that the public could see firsthand what these animals could do. At one of these shows in particular in Boston, a handler and his dog were out on the floor doing their thing when a woman from the crowd suddenly flags them down, saying, that's her dog. So the officer in charge takes notice and sees this as just being an opportunity that is just way too good to pass up. So he invites her down. And as she's making her way across the arena, the dog spots her from clear across the other side of it, and immediately his eyes lock onto her. And his tail is just going, it's wagging, his whole body is lit up, and the handler just looks down at him, leans in, and just says the word, "Stay." The officer then motions the woman to stand right over here and says, you know, go ahead, call out to him. Just see if you can get him to come over to you. And so she does. She starts calling him by his name. She's urging him to come over. And not once, not one time did that dog move. This dude is just locked in. He's like a statue. The only thing that's giving him away is just the tiniest little twitch in his body. Then, after letting the moment hang there for a second, the handler just leans down towards the dog's ear, and he just says, in the softest voice possible, he just says, "Okay." And that was it. The dog just took off full speed towards his owner, and he's just jumping on her, and he's just happy, and he's licking all on her, and he's just doing that full-blown canine happy cry. And I know you know the one I'm talking about. I know you've seen the videos. You know the ones where, you know, the soldier comes home from a deployment and the dog just completely loses its mind, and now you're just sitting there at work hiding out, trying to pretend like you're not sitting on your phone ugly crying in your cubicle like a bitch, and then the first thing you do when you get home is hug your own dog like she's the last remaining source of joy in this broken world. Or maybe it's just me, don't judge. Either way, that's what happens, and it's awesome. Everyone is loving it, and with one recall command, the dog runs back to the handler, and the Army has one more marketing success story to share in the history books. And you know, guys, it's moments like this that are exactly why this program stuck with people. Because these weren't just mascots, they weren't just props, and they damn sure weren't just fundraising marketing material. These were real working animals who were about to do real military jobs, and in a whole lot of cases, they were destined to save a whole lot of real human lives. Alright, now normally this is the part of the video where I jump forward in time a bit and go all in on one of the most famous war dog stories for the entire war. But I'm not going to do any of that today. There's no reason for me to wax poetic about Chips or Sergeant Stubby because other Nick has already got that covered. So if you haven't seen that one already, go ahead and check that one out next. Guys, as always, I appreciate y'all watching. And if you want to support me and everything we're doing here, then head over to TangoAlpha.store and grab yourself some tactically acquired merch. Well, now that that's done, I guess it's time to get started on the next video. Tac out. Who's a good girl? Who's a good girl? Not your personal salt block. Dog hair.